Denver, Clippers. I mean, there's gonna be a potentially a third of the league that are going to be either apron or first team. Even teams like Memphis. People are like, Memphis, how'd that happen? Well, when you're picking seventh and you got a first round pick, or you're Portland and you got 7 and 14, and you've got Ayton and Jeremy Grant and Brogdon and Robert Williams and Simons and all these different things, like this stuff adds up here. So Phoenix is not the only team that's kind of in this spot right now.
We're welcoming in now Bobby Marks of ESPN to talk all things salary cap, second apron, numbers, you name it. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good, guys. How are you doing?
Well, hopefully better after this conversation. Maybe we'll find some things that we could be a little bit more excited about with where the Suns currently sit. But that kind of leads me into my first question. Bobby, can you help me understand how on earth CJ McCollum and Grant Williams let these second tax apron restrictions happen in the first place?
Yeah, that's probably a question a lot of people want to answer, would like to answer. I think where the league was looking, and not speaking for the Player Association or for CJ or for Grant, I think the other option is you were probably looking at some type of hard cap, a real hard cap, where you really were going to basically force to choose what players you wanted to keep on your roster. So if it was, with Devin and Kevin, then maybe, you probably wouldn't have been able to do a Bradley Beal type trade. So this is a little bit of a softer blow. I think where this is right now, and certainly after a year of digesting it, and we'll see, with all these new restrictions starting, it really forces you to keep your own players, or prioritize keeping your own players, and then eliminating what you can add from the outside. I mean, that's the reality as far as you don't really get a get out of jail free card like maybe you did a couple years ago to maybe make a trade where you can take back 125% of salary. These new rules, you really have to like your roster. You really have to hit on maybe some, whether it be draft picks, low cost players, guys on minimum deals. Boston can get away with it, right now when you have, Brown about to start on a supermax, and then Tatum. But eventually you're going to have to pay Derek White. So you're going to have to figure out there. But you have Sam Hauser, who's on a minimum contract. So it kind of balances out. But yeah, these new rules are extremely restrictive. I was talking to a team out in Chicago, and they said to me, my owner asked me, can I still make trades? And I said to him, yeah, I can. But now it's like 4 steps, right? It's like a 4-step process. Am I triggering the apron? Am I sending out cash? Am I aggregating contracts? All these different nuances that just weren't there beforehand. So when you put pen to paper last April, it looked good, but now I think you're going to start feeling a big time squeeze here.
I'm a little frustrated because even the day it was signed, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, doesn't this hurt veterans down the road? And it just doesn't make any sense. With that being said, how come there wasn't any, maybe some maneuvering in terms of the way the NBA cap does work in terms of, throwing in contracts, being, waived and extended, so that way extended for a longer period of time at a lower rate, maybe, or maybe some type of other exceptions that you could use as a franchise like they have in other leagues?
Yeah, I mean, we had the amnesty clause at one time. That was in 2011 CBA. There was the amnesty clause, and we used it in New Jersey. We had signed Travis Outlaw the year before, and then $8 million back then was a lot of money, and we wound up using the amnesty clause on him, and it would basically wiped his. You still had to pay him, but it wiped his number off. And that's when the new CBA came in. So it kind of gave you that financial flexibility to, hey, maybe you have one bad contract on your roster to kind of shed it. the waive and stretch provision, how it is right now, it is certainly limited, right? So if you have I'm trying to give an example. Let's say you have a player on your roster who's got a year left. Well, the most years is 3 years that you could stretch it. So you're kind of limited as far as, I mean, you'd love to stretch it over 6 or 7 years. It's different than the NFL where you can restructure contracts. You can't do that in the NBA. Basically, it's a buyout as far as buyout and reducing the cost there. So yeah, the rules are, and I mean, 90% of these contracts are guaranteed. I mean, that's the other thing there is that we live in a league where most contracts are guaranteed. So as I said, like you better, like whoever you sign, whoever you trade for, you better like who they are, and you better hope that fits. And that's the free agency is, is a crapshoot because I always call it like the honeymoon period, right? Like what looks good on paper, maybe doesn't always translate there. And I'm not saying what Phoenix was able to do. Like I liked, like you can go back and everything I've written, I liked what they did. Like I really did. Like I liked the Durant trade. I understood and you guys have a better perspective, like where they were with that roster. And I think you kind of maybe had hit a limit there. Certainly when you get the Dallas series probably exposed a lot of things. That Game 7, how it ended. I understood the Beal trade. Probably my only argument against that, I would have loved to have him eliminate the no trade clause as part of the deal. Like I would have loved to seen that, but that's hindsight. And I understood why they did that, basically because these new rules were about to start within, in a year. And it's like, it's why Boston went out and got Holiday, why the Clippers went out and got Harden, why all these Lillard in Milwaukee. You had a timeline to go out and do these deals here. And I understand where Phoenix is as far as, continuity, and everyone says, well, you got to break up these 3 guys. No, you don't. Like this is who you are, right? Like this is who you are for right now. And you got to kind of have to see it through here. So, but yeah, I get it. Like I wish some of the rules were like the NFL where maybe you can restructure contracts, or maybe you can, you would love to restructure the Bradley Beal contract where you say, you know what, we're going to reduce your $50 million number to 30. And then we're going to give you a deferred compensation, 4 years from now where, if you're not on a roster, that $20 million will still be owed back to you.
Yeah, I wish it was the NFL too, Bobby. So I got a question, Bobby. We all know the Suns are over the second apron. Yeah. I have a question about some of the contracts going into the summer. For instance, sure. Eric Gordon, Drew Eubanks. They got player options. We got cap holds on Royce O'Neal. Yep. Are those player options and cap holds calculated into the second apron? And how does that work? Are they already pre-calculated, or does something have to happen for them to count towards the second apron?
Yeah, so the guys with the player options, and there's a bunch of them, right? With Eubanks and Gordon and Okogie and Lee, that group of guys. Considering that they are under contract still, those count, right? So that is determined as salary. What doesn't count right now until that player is signed is your first round pick. Okay, I mean I still factored in there just in case you do keep that. First round picks don't count until they're signed. Royce O'Neal doesn't count. Cap hold doesn't count here. So there are mechanisms there that you do have, I guess, a little bit of flexibility. I would recommend if I was in Phoenix with some of these guys with free agents. And I think Okogie and Lee are a little bit different because they were signed with non-bird rights and their number is a little bit higher. I would tell Eric Gordon, I would tell Drew Eubanks to opt out of your contract, okay? And to go out and shop for a deal. And if you can come back, if you get to sign a deal with another team, great. And if not, we'll have a minimum waiting for you. But what happens is because those guys sign these 2-year deals, you're not getting charged the 2 years of service number. So, for example, like Eric's number is like at 3 and change. His number would now be like $2.1 million. So he would still get the 3, but because it's a 1-year deal now, it lowers his number from a cap hit, and it helps you at least towards the apron. And who knows, maybe there is a deal down the road where, I don't think that's the priority of ownership to, we have to save, we have to get under, $6 million, but you never know down the road if that could help you there.
Huh.
Oh, that's fascinating. Bobby, this is a question.
We saw that real quick. Montrezl Harrell did that in Philadelphia. He opted out last year. He tested the market. He eventually came back, and instead of Philly having like a $2.8 million number, it was like at 2.1, and it helped. It played a role when they were able to go do the Harden trade as far as the ability to take back some more money.
Absolutely. Bobby, this is one we've gotten a lot of questions about in terms of when the new league year starts exactly, especially as a team that's eliminated from the playoffs. Was it at that point? Is it on July 1st when the league's new year starts? So can you tell the people, when do these second tax apron restrictions come into play for Phoenix?
Yeah, so it started. It started the Monday after the regular season was over, the first day of the offseason here for some of these harsher restriction rules. So if you're Phoenix and you're in the second apron now, if you wanted to go out and make a trade right now, the inability to aggregate contracts. So if you wanted to send Nurkic and Little out for like a $24 million guy, you can't do that. The inability to take back more money, it's basically dollar for dollar. Now you can take back contracts that are aggregated from the other team. Okay, so if you want to send out one guy and take back two, you're allowed to do that. The inability to send out cash in a trade. So if you're Phoenix the night of the draft, you can't go out and buy a pick. I mean, you do have a first round pick. So of course you can't use your tax mid-level exception. You could sign buyout guys in the offseason. There's no restriction on buyout guys. That's only during the regular season as far as that rule comes into place, as far as going about doing that. And what's going to happen is how it impacts teams is, I'll give you an example, Minnesota for right now. So Minnesota finished the regular season not in the apron, right? Neither apron, they're below the luxury tax. But come July 1st, Anthony Edwards, McDaniels, Conley, Cat Supermax, their salaries are going to balloon over the second apron. So if they made a deal when their season is over, they send out cash in a deal, they can do that, okay? Because their salaries are not right now. It's for starting July 1. However, it would trigger the apron rules. So they would get to July 1 and be like, wait a minute, Phoenix, you sent out $2 million. You can't exceed this amount. You'll have to make a trade now to reduce your numbers below that here. But yeah, I mean, I think that the common misconception, and certainly because Phoenix has 3 guys on max contract, like they're not the only one. Like they're not the only one here. Like, I mean, we put out these graphics after each team loses in the playoffs, and like Denver, Clippers. I mean, there's gonna be a potentially a third of the league that are going to be either apron or first team. Even teams like Memphis. People are like, Memphis, how'd that happen? Well, when you're picking 7th and you got a first round pick, and where you're Portland and you got 7 and 14, and you've got Ayton and Jeremy Grant and Brogdon and Robert Williams and Simons and all these different things, like this stuff adds up here. So Phoenix is not the only team that's kind of in this spot right now.
Okay, Bobby, the real question here that everyone wants to know, are there some loopholes that we just haven't quite figured out yet? So for example, right, is there a realistic way that the Suns could maybe get under the second apron by hypothetically unloading Jusuf Nurkic $18.1 million contract to a team that can just absorb that contract and not take something back for the Suns? And if so, would they no longer be bound by those second apron limitations? Like, are there some loopholes we can get with it?
No. That's a terrific question. I mean, like, yeah, so you could go out and do something like that. So we're looking at, I don't know, somewhere between 6 and 7 teams that have cap space this offseason. You've got to spend it. How the new rules are, you've got to spend 90% of the salary cap by the first day of the regular season. So if you're Philadelphia and you've got $5 million to spend, you've got to spend, $127 million up to the cap. Detroit's another team. San Antonio, Utah, Orlando. Like there's a list of teams out there. So would it cost you? Would you have to add something to it? I don't know. I mean, it depends on how that team values a Nurkic. So once you go under, right? So you knock that $16-17 million. Once you're under, then you're under. Then you're a team that is operating as a first apron team or just a luxury tax team here. So there is like KCP in Denver is an example. KCP's got a player option for next year. Denver is considered a second apron team. He opts out. He goes elsewhere. They go under I think the first, maybe even the first and second apron. And then all of a sudden, all these resources that weren't available to you, the ability to aggregate contracts, the ability to take back more money, that now becomes available to you.
So with that being said, loophole number 2, if they were somehow to get into that first apron, can they then make a trade that would get the necessary resources back, but also it puts them back into that second apron? Can they still do that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, basically what would happen is that as long as you're not using one of the things, the I guess resources that would trigger it. Okay, so for example, let's say you move Nurkic, and now you're a first apron team. Okay, and now all of a sudden you want to take back more money in a trade. Then that would trigger the apron or aggregate. That would basically would restart everything up. If you moved the number and you wanted to aggregate contracts and take back players and still leaves you below the second apron, then you're allowed to do that here.
Gotcha.
Okay, so you can't go from one apron down to the other apron to try to go back up to
and then go back up.
I got it. That's why we love you, Bobby. You got it all, man. All right, so I have a question that we're going to stay down this road.
Yeah.
3-team trades.
Yeah.
Okay. I know that this is a question I need answered, man.
Yeah.
If you make a 3-team trade, are you allowed to send out one player to every team and aggregate salaries that way? Because I know you can't aggregate salaries, but in a 3-team trade, can you send out multiple players to individual teams?
Yeah. So as long as the contracts are not aggregated together, right? So like if you're acquiring a $15 million player, okay, and you need to send out, and you have 2 guys making 7.5, and one guy's going to team A and one guy's going to team B, you're not going to be allowed to do that because it's considered those contracts are aggregated together to take back that money. So that in that scenario would not work. Fortunately for Phoenix, you guys are getting one of the top salary cap guys in the NBA. I don't say that just because I worked with him back in New Jersey, and he started back in 2011. But Matty Tellem, who I guess will be made official probably sometimes down the road, who Phoenix is going to hire, is one of the best. I mean, like, he is like creative, 3 teams, like all different, besides everything else that comes with it. If there's a way to figure out something, he'll be able to figure it out. And I think that's kind of what, as far as just like, you don't want to think you're stuck, right? Like, we're stuck with this roster. This is what we have. Not a bad thing, but no, I think there are ways to go about doing it. It's going to take more creativity than Oklahoma City, for example, that's maybe sitting on a lot of money and draft picks and all that.
All right, got another one for you, Bobby. I'm on fire right now. I got to get you back to back here. All right, so signing trades. The Suns are not allowed as a second apron team to receive a player in a signing trade.
Yes.
We have Royce O'Neal, who's got a cap hold, who's a free agent now.
Yep.
I believe we're allowed to trade Royce O'Neal in a signing trade. Explain a little bit to me, and then here's another question loaded onto that.
Yep.
Can we give Royce O'Neal more money to kind of find a loophole? Can we give him I wouldn't say a max contract, but pay him a little bit more to try to make a deal and circumvent some of these restrictions?
Yeah, so when Royce was acquired, you inherited his bird rights. So the bird rights gives you the ability to exceed the salary cap, no matter if you're a luxury tax team or an apron team. It doesn't matter. That's the one thing they allow you to do is basically, as I said, retain your own free agents. So if you want to pay Royce O'Neal 2 years, $20 million, and give him a team option in the year 2, basically the Bruce Brown contract that was signed in Indiana, and then flip him on January 15th when his restriction is lifted, you can go out and do that. And that's probably, like, I wouldn't get caught up like what the luxury tax number would be right now, as far as, he'll sign a $20 million deal and we'll say, oh, it cost them another $100 million. It's really what your luxury tax is at the end of the year. It's not with what it is right now. But yeah, I mean, that's a way to do it, because certainly, signing him and then trading him in mid-January, that's one way to do it. And then, of course, as far as sign and trades, as you mentioned, sign and trades got to be for a minimum of 3 years. First year has to be guaranteed. That's it. Okay, so if you want to move him for, he agrees to it, you do a sign and trade, and you want to take back something else, you're allowed to go out and do that.
Oh, that's another trade avenue. Obviously, the big one for the Suns with trading things is probably attaching one of their 2 picks that will become trade eligible on draft night to a player's salary. But we've gotten a lot of questions about this.
Yeah.
At what point does a draft pick, like that number 22 pick, change from a pick as an asset to a rookie salary that then you cannot aggregate with another player's salary?
Yeah, it's a good question. So let's fast forward to June 26th. Phoenix has a deal where they're going to trade the 22nd pick and Nurkic, for example, to another team. So basically, they are trading the draft rights of that player who hasn't signed a contract. So there's no value, right? He counts as zero. He counts as zero until he signs his contract. And when he signs his contract, you'd have to wait 30 days anyway to move that player here. So once the draft starts, the Phoenix selects, then that basically flips the calendar over. So now all of a sudden 2031 becomes available. So now we're not looking back. We're looking forward. The 7-year rule looks forward here. So you have 31 that you can be they can trade, and then you can trade the draft rights to that certain player.
Okay, good to know. Now, we've gotten a lot of questions about that 2031 pick as well.
Yeah.
How many years, obviously the Suns are 2 for 2 in terms of being a second tax apron team. How many years do you have to be in the tax apron over the next 3 with those first 2 for that 2032 pick to be frozen or moved to the back of the first round? Can you kind of explain what that process looks like?
Yeah, so 31 is not frozen. That's in play because basically how the rules are right now, if Phoenix finishes the 24-25 season, when we get to June and they do all their accounting next June, and they say Phoenix is the second apron team. Now all of a sudden 2032 is frozen. So now you're looking at it in a 3-year vacuum as far as where your picks are. It's frozen. There's a way to get it unfrozen if you're out of the second apron. I believe 3 out of 4 years. I would say it's we make a lot to do about that pick possibly moving from 24 to 14, right? There's a mechanism that if you're in the tax, I think it's 4 years, it would all of a sudden shift. I mean, you have to make a really concerted effort to do that. I mean, you really have to make an effort. And by then, who knows where Kevin will be, who knows where Beal will be, Devin will still be on that contract. So I would say that your 32 pick will probably be frozen. You can move 31, before that happens. So I think if you're looking at it from a trade standpoint, I think you would probably want to move 31. I would, maybe what does the 22nd pick bring you? It's a guy on a low cost contract. I think it's a pretty decent draft. Hopefully you strike gold where Miami did and Golden State and some of these other teams that were able to get, 3 or 4 year guys.
And just to clarify, for that 2032 pick, if it gets frozen and then it moves to the back of the first round, it's no longer trade eligible, right?
That is, once it's frozen, it's off the board. Yeah.
All right, so Bobby, you just talked about the draft. I've been watching your draft combine work, and it's been very impressive, man.
I appreciate it.
You've done a fantastic job.
4 hours of TV is not easy.
And I've enjoyed every minute of it, man. I've been locked in. You guys have done a fantastic job. My question is, one, since you're there and you were doing all that work, is there a draft prospect that you've seen in your time down there that may not be getting enough hype that you're like, hey, this kid could be a player? And then the second part is, what are you seeing from Bronny James? What's the if you can give me that.
Yeah, awesome. So one of the things that I've done for the last 6 or 7 years is, which I love doing, it's a lot of work and time, is I work with agents to help their clients prepare them for their interview when they meet with teams. So on average, this year I've done about 60 players in the 3 weeks before the combine. I started with Jason Tatum 7 years ago, and kind of just built up a network here. And it gives me some really good insight into who they are, and then I can go on TV and talk about them and really share their story. The one player, and I said this on, I think it was Wednesday, that I really enjoyed meeting with, I enjoyed watching him at UC Santa Barbara, was AJ Mitchell, who was a 3-year guy from Belgium, defends like crazy, plays point, 6'5", good body, really competed in the combine.
The Google machine in Phoenix just skyrocketed right now.
I love guys that can compete in Chicago. I know the body of work of what you've seen during the course of the year. I think he played hurt this year too, he told me, for most of the year, but still was out there. Got better that's your 3-year guy, right? That's a guy that you draft, you could probably put him in a game right away. So I enjoyed watching him, getting to know him. Bronny is interesting because McDonald's All-American, coming out of Sierra Canyon. We all know about what happened last July with the cardiac arrest. Doesn't play basketball for basically 4 or 5 months, right? Doesn't pick up a ball. Gets put into I would say, somewhat chaotic situation at USC, a team that a lot of people thought were going to be better. Like, things were like chaos there, right? Like, off the rails. 19 minutes, 27% from 3, 30, 5 points, really nondescript. Comes to Chicago. I went out to LA to talk with him, met with him. I loved him. He was terrific. Awesome personality, engaging, got big. He's up to 215 right now, like all muscle, could play like outside linebacker for you. Shot the heck out of the ball when I saw him in LA. Shot the heck out of the ball Monday night in the combine, right? So that raised everyone's eyes, right? When you're shooting 19 to 25 from 3, I don't care if there's 3 other guys out there. It's still pretty impressive, and his mechanics looked really good. Now we get to Tuesday, and now we're all expecting everything. We're expecting his dad to show up. We're expecting all these different things. And he struggled, right? They had him playing point, not a point guard. Doesn't measure great, 6'1.5" without shoes. So he's probably, 6'2 1/4. So what is he, right? He's a small 2 guard. He can defend like crazy, right? So his comp, when he talked to me, when he did his media was Davion Mitchell. Like, I asked, which is great. I love players when I ask them, who do you like to watch and who do you like to study? And when they say, well, I like Damian Lillard. Does he play like Damian Lillard? No, I just like how he shoots the ball. I'm like, okay, who do you like to watch? Davion Mitchell. Okay, why? Well, I love how he defends. Okay, so Tuesday he struggles. Wednesday they play him off the ball. They've got Mark Sears from Alabama playing point. Mark didn't play the day before because he had a quad injury. And then they had A.J. Johnson, who's a Fresno kid who played in Australia last year. So both those guys played. So Bronny plays off the ball and plays really well. I mean, shoots 4 for 10. But in game 1, all he would take was a little floater down the lane, right? Like, really, that was kind of like, is that the only thing he has? Made a step back, hit a corner 3, was really active, good on defense. So now it's like, okay, he can play, right? Like, I think he's an NBA level player. I think Gavoni moved him up to 54 on his top 100. He was at 98. So there's movement there. Do I think he's a first-round prospect? Probably not. I don't think, though. Do I think he can get drafted? I do. Is there teams in the 20s or 30s that you think, okay, remove the dad factor here, right? It drives me crazy. Well, if we draft him, or is the dad coming too? Let's just worry about the player. Do I think he can step on an NBA floor next year? Probably not, right? I think you would probably see him more in the G League. I think he's a work in development. I think he's an investment, two-year investment, and then you could probably see him on the floor. But that's with most late first-round guys, second-round picks, two-way guys that you're going to see him with their G League team here. So I think he helped himself. I think he helped himself competing. What he does in his individual workouts over the month will certainly help. But I would not be stunned at all when, for our sake, because we had 2 nights of the draft, that on day 2 he gets selected somewhere here. Where, I don't know. Would it be teams that have multiple picks and you want to take a flyer and you got what you want for somebody that, would help you, I could see that. Does it make sense if you're picking 15 to take them and you need a player? That might be a little bit more of a reach there.
Oh, okay. Well, so it sounds like you're saying that LeBron James might take a, nice little vet minimum just to come here. Is that what I heard?
22.
After all that, that's all I heard.
But here, let me. I'm going to be actually serious in this. I like the question. I'm going to be serious. I think it would be a disservice for teams not to make the call and ask the question. I really do, and I think there's a multi-step process here. I think first of all, get your scouts in a room. Usually, you don't start doing your board until like the weekend before the draft starts. So we would bring our guys in like Saturday, Sunday. Scouts would be doing your top 60, top 75, and that's how you start doing it. I do think there's probably a conversation you have with your scouts now and say, hey, give me a preliminary big board, right? Give me your top 60, top 75, and let's see where. Listen, if you get it and Bronny's not on there, it's a little bit of a stretch there. But I do think there's a conversation with the agent, Rich Paul, saying, hey, we have interest in him at 20. I'm just hypothetical. We have interest in him at 22. Where do you see what's LeBron going to do, right? Like, our situation here. Like, this is what we got. We got $3 million, right? We have a really appealing developmental program. This is not about the dad. This is about, investing long term in him, all that stuff. But I do think it's worth having the conversation. I really do. I mean, I think every team has to have the conversation. It's because until you ask, you never know.
Couldn't agree more, Bobby.
I mean, Matt Ishbia has been gung-ho from day one of building out that G League team and getting better at the development of younger players. So, you know what I'm saying? Bobby, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate this. This was great stuff. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Everyone, of course, if you are not already following Bobby on social, you absolutely should be at Bobby Marks 42.